Yes, it is. That's a new Zoom feature. It actually speaks to me. All right. So we want to look at my notes. Welcome, everyone. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared by the Chamber's media channels for public viewing post-event. My name is Flori Chakowski. I'm the Executive Director here at the Chamber of Commerce, serving Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows, a nonpartisan organization. We would like to acknowledge the Katzie First Nation and Kwantlen First Nation on whose traditional territories Chamber activities take place. Our heartfelt condolences are with the Indigenous peoples and communities mourning the tragedies of the residential schools. And our thoughts and blessings to the survivors and Indigenous communities as we work together towards reconciliation. And thank you to our presenters for making the time to speak to us today and for all of you in attendance. If you did not pre-submit your questions, you may post them to the Q&A or chat option, and we will do our best to make sure that we get to them after the presentation. So with that, I am going to open presentation and discussion. How many times did I say presentation? So welcome our Minister and MLA for Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows, Lisa Beare. Parliamentary Secretary and MLA for Maple Ridge Mission, Bob D, will be joining into the conversation as well. So welcome and thank you for being here. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Flori, and thank you for beginning with that acknowledgement. I personally am speaking from the territory of the Lekwungen peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, but taking a moment to reflect on the impact of the news out of Kamloops, that our elders, their families, and survivors of Indian residential schools are having with our Katzie and our Kwantlen First Nations here is an important moment to recognize. So thank you, Flori, for taking the time to do that. And I'm personally glad to have the opportunity to speak with members of the Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows Chamber of Commerce after we released Budget 2021. And joining us today is Bob Deef, MLA for Maple Ridge Mission and Parliamentary Secretary for Arts and Culture and Film. And as you all know, because you felt it in your homes, in your family, in the work that we've been doing over this past year, we all are facing many challenges because of the pandemic. It has touched all of our lives in different ways, and people are still feeling the effects, and they will for some time. But there's good reasons for hope, including our vaccination rollout. We have 74.5% of all adults in BC vaccinated as of yesterday, and 72.4% of all youth over 12. I mean, this is great news. We have 99% of the jobs have returned to our provincial economy. These are positive signs. And our budget 2021 is about building today for that better tomorrow we're all working towards. Our budget does respond to the impacts of the pandemic, of today's challenges, and it prepares us for the future challenges. We are investing in healthcare. We are strengthening the services that all of us depend on. And we're making sure that we're building that bridge to recovery that will give us those better days ahead we want to talk about. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and personally thank you all for everything you have done and the sacrifices that you've made in the past 15 months to keep all of us safe. I know the impacts it's had on many of your businesses, and making those tough choices has allowed us to get to where we are now in a restart plan with great news on the horizon. So with that, I'll ask Bob to say a few words of welcome, and then we'll get started on our presentation.
Well, thanks so much, Lisa. And I also wanted to recognize that I'm speaking to everyone from the traditional territory of the Katzie and Kwantlen First Nation, and also wanted to echo my thoughts in regards to the residential school issue in Kamloops, which has obviously touched not only people in British Columbia and Canada, but around the world. So my thoughts are certainly with everybody and all of the First Nations. And Lisa, you write about Budget 2021 because really the focus here is people and businesses, and we're all trying to work across BC fight the virus and get back to life and get back on track. I was really pleased today to be able to get my second AstraZeneca shot at the Save on Foods and in Valley Fair. So I was, it's really great to see that we're getting the second shots now for people so that people can be fully vaccinated. I'm really, really pleased about that, and wanted to thank the local pharmacies for taking on part of that role of vaccinating everyone. And because of the vaccinations, we can see that the numbers are going down, which is wonderful. It's just so wonderful to see. And you could see Dr. Bonnie Henry, the emotion in her voice when she speaks about the light at the end of the tunnel and how, you know, how that's coming along. And of course, we're fortunate in British Columbia because British Columbians did the hard work to keep everyone safe, and of course our public health officers. And so we're in actually a very good position for economic recovery in British Columbia. And so really it's about being ready for that and all the challenges about that reopening will bring. And it really is a testament to the people and the businesses and the community. And throughout this, both Lisa and I have seen just such amazing cooperation between people and businesses and all levels of government and all the nonprofits and everybody working. So I just wanted to also extend my gratitude to all the businesses, you know, in the Chamber of Commerce and everyone who's worked so hard to keep us all safe and to position us to be here for a strong recovery. So I'll just turn it back to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So next slide. Before I move into the bigger budget details, I think it's important that we do a brief review of the broader economic picture that we have here in BC to set that context. And so this slide shows private sector growth forecasts for Canada and for the provinces. And all provinces saw significant impacts last year, very understandable. So that is shown on the chart on the left. Now, a recovery is expected for this year. And in the recent weeks, private sector forecasters have updated their near-term economic growth projections for BC and show a stronger recovery. The projections show BC's recovery is expected to be better than the national average. And that speaks to our resilience here in our BC economy, that despite the challenges of the pandemic and the challenges of last year, that our strengths do remain. We still have an abundance of highly skilled people. We are still the gateway to Asia. We have emerging technologies here and natural resources. Next slide, please. So our budget 2021 is focused on the province's response and recovery from the effects of COVID-19. So this is a deliberate, thoughtful approach to make sure that government continues to, number one, protect the health and safety of British Columbians. That has been paramount. That has been our number one goal throughout the pandemic, everything we did in economic recovery, and certainly in the budgets moving forward and ahead. We want to make sure we support people and businesses as we continue to manage through the effects of the pandemic, and we have the important preparation work done, and so that we can be ready to seize the opportunities that recovery will hold for us. So we have, in addition to new permanent investments of $8.7 billion over the fiscal plan, we've included significant pandemic and recovery contingencies, which is essential to keep us nimble and responsive to the needs, your needs, and the needs of the province. So this will ensure that the province can continue to deliver our COVID-19 response and make sure we can continue those recovery measures. We need to manage the ongoing uncertainties and the risks of the pandemic. So Budget 2021 also makes significant new capital commitments in health, transportation, education. There's hospitals, schools, post-secondary facilities. We have transit and roads and other infrastructure all around the province. And it's expected to be a record $26.4 billion in spending on infrastructure over the fiscal plan period, which is remarkable and a historic high. Next slide, please. And that's you, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So, you know, just to pick up on what Lisa's talking about, you know, obviously an investment in our services and supports for people are so critical for our economy. And so, if you don't have a healthy people, you cannot have a healthy economy. And that's why it's been so important to have focused as our government has on the recommendations of public health throughout the last 16 months. And it's also important to highlight the importance of a strong health and medical health services. And that's a very important part of this budget. I mean, part of that, of course, in budget 2021 is funding to get people vaccinated so that we can get through this. And we've already seen the impact of vaccines on the numbers, the case numbers, the numbers of hospitalizations. And that becomes an absolute top priority for the government. There's also in the budget, it provides more than $4 billion in funding for health and mental health to continue to protect people from COVID and expand the services that we all rely on. And that includes continued support for the largest ever vaccination program in British Columbia history to ensure that we can all receive a vaccine if we want the vaccine. And we're seeing, people getting vaccines around the province and now starting to get second doses as well. The budget also includes funding for reduced waiting times for surgeries and getting patients the faster access to the help they need, which is so important because we know that COVID has also put a lot of strain on surgeries with cancellations, but the health ministry bounced back very quickly with that in terms of getting people the surgeries they need. The other very important piece is support for seniors who've been especially affected, not only from a health point of view, but being, isolated and had so many issues during COVID. And so that's why there are improvements to long-term care and home care in this budget. There's also the largest investment in mental health services in British Columbia, $500 million. And that's to help build a network of mental health supports throughout the province. And that includes things like youth programs in schools, or our foundry. We have a foundry in Maple Ridge, and integrated child and youth supports in 15 school districts, including our own. And of course, we want to improve access and quality to mental health services generally throughout the province. And so that's why it's important to continue these strong investments. And also in particular, we want to have also focused on mental health and addiction services for Indigenous people. There's also an increased resources for a full spectrum of substance use treatment and recovery services, including funding for opioid treatments. And so the budget is positioned to help more people get on the path to recovery with these new treatment beds and recovery beds. And so that's very important. And also focus on building critical health infrastructure with $7.8 billion in capital investments to support major construction projects like new and upgrade hospitals, and more will come with that. Next slide. Yeah, and in regards to the supports that people rely on, I mean, people and businesses across the provinces are working hard to fight the virus and get on track. And we're really trying to work with you with this. We are continuing to invest in services that people count on. For example, the budget increases funding to K-12 education to support children, teachers, schools, and families. It includes free public transportation for children 12 and under in time for classes in September. And just to put that in perspective, what that means for residents of Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows that rely on TransLink, that could save up to $672 per child per year. It's a significant savings. Next slide. Now, one thing that has been said quite often during the pandemic is, we're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats, and that not everyone is affected by the pandemic in the same way. And so for people who are experiencing economic and social barriers because of the pandemic and additional barriers, we really had to be mindful of helping vulnerable people. And that's why in the budget 2021, we funded the largest permanent increase in income and disability rates ever. And for low income seniors, we doubled the senior supplement rate. And that's the first increase in the history of the program. And our government's also continuing to support people with homelessness There's more than 3,000 temporary shelters and hotel spaces that people were experiencing homelessness during the pandemic. And of course, that includes meals and support staff and equipment needed to maintain safe shelters. And these investments will, continue to make us all of these investments will help us to reduce our poverty in our province and hit our poverty reduction goals. We want to reduce overall poverty by 25% and child poverty by 50% by 2024. And we're on track for that. Next slide.
And this one's me. Thank you. So childcare, we know that quality, affordable, and inclusive childcare is critical to families in our communities, and it's critical to our economy. In 2018, we launched Childcare BC to bring that goal of affordable, accessible, quality childcare to families all across the province. And since then, we have funded the creation of over 2,600 new childcare spaces. And there's thousands of new spaces funded each year under our New Spaces Fund. Our budget 2021 does provide more funding to create more spaces. And it helps support the workforce behind the workforce. We have wage increases for early childhood educators. And we are more than doubling the number of children who can get $10 a day or less childcare through our Universal Childcare Prototype Program. There's new spaces for the Aboriginal Head Start program, which provides culturally relevant childcare spaces for Indigenous families. And it supports thousands of new childcare spaces in our Childcare New Spaces Fund. To date, we've invested nearly $2.3 billion to create new spaces, to do EC wages increases, and to create the prototype sites, and to provide direct funding supports for families through fee reduction programs. Maple Ridge Pitt Meadows and Maple Ridge Mission combined have received $59 million in investments in spaces, in wage enhancements, and in those fee reductions. And in fact, the fee reductions alone for the families of Maple Ridge Pitt Meadows and Maple Ridge Mission account for almost $26 million in savings since 2018. So it's $26 million back in the pockets of our families and our communities to spend locally in our economy. Now, next slide. The COVID-19 pandemic has contributed to a high activity we're seeing in the housing market. Lots more people are working from home, and the demands for more space has increased activity. So we have low interest rates combined with a low inventory of homes, which has driven up prices. However, we do expect some moderation in the market in 2022 as the recovery takes hold and all orders of government continue our combined efforts to improve housing affordability. We work hard to tackle the crisis by addressing speculation and reducing rent increases, and we currently have a rent freeze in effect. We're continuing to work towards our goal of building over 114,000 affordable homes in over 10 years. Now, to date, more than 26,000 new homes have been completed or underway across the province, and Budget 2021 does continue to invest in that, in new low and middle income housing units with funding for nonprofit providers. We have $1.6 billion of provincial capital in investments. And we're providing $2 billion in additional financing to expand the Housing Hub program, which will help create 9,000 new homes for families over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, on top of the 1,000 units that the Housing Hub had completed to date. Next slide. So there's a central commitment of government to make life more affordable for people. We've been saying that since we formed government in 2017. Our budget 2021 focuses on investments that are going to ensure no one is left behind as we continue to fight the pandemic and move on into recovery. So we have investments that build on our previous measures taken that are going to help make a difference for people every day. We have the more affordable childcare that we're continuing to expand in this budget. We eliminated the MSP premiums. We have the BC Child Opportunity Benefit that families started receiving last October, but now will deliver full savings for the first year in 2021. Funding that now extends until age 18, because we know the cost of raising a family only increases as children get older. So, this is a significant investment in families when, the opportunity benefit only used to last until age 6. We have increased that and extended it to age 18. We did do the elimination of bridge tolls, which saved people upwards of $1,200 a year. And we're returning ICBC to an affordable car insurance provider. And we put an average of $400 back in the pockets of British Columbians in ensuring affordable rates. Many people will be seeing refund checks as well that came out this spring. So these measures and those in budget 2021 are all building to make life more affordable for people. Next slide, over to you, Bob.
Great, thanks so much, Lisa. And I can certainly attest to the fact that the cost of raising a child does go up. At one point, 5 teenagers, if the food bill was a mortgage payment, basically. Anyway, thanks so much for that, Lisa. So one of the things during the pandemic that's really important is the supports the provinces made for people and businesses. And British Columbia, with budget 2021 and last year's budget, we have the most supports per capita of any province in the country for people and businesses. And that's very, very important for our people and our businesses. And we continue the measures to make sure that we can adapt and prepare to seize opportunities that the recovery will bring. So we don't, we really want to get the support to people and businesses as we have been, and build on the supports that we had last year. And one of those supports were, for example, the Stronger BC tax incentive for employers to have hired or increased compensation in the last quarter of 2020 compared to the previous quarter. We've got funding for Grow BC, Feed BC, and Buy BC. It was awesome seeing on a lot of new packages the logo for Buy BC on so many packages of food that we're buying now. It's wonderful to see that uptake. PST exemption on select machinery and equipment to help businesses expand, and of course the ongoing small and medium-sized business recovery grant program. It's really important to support small and medium-sized businesses. And of course, budget 2021, includes supports targeted for the hardest hit sectors, because some sectors are hit harder than others. Of course, tourism, arts, and hospitality. And so there's actually $120 million through budget 2021 to support tourism recovery, and that's underway now. And of course, recently there was an announcement for a major attraction funding that happened, and that was in response to what the tourism industry was asking for. There's also additional funding for community destination developments through grants that'll help communities as well, and prepare for visitors to come back. There's also new infrastructure for trails and airport improvements that have been going on. And of course, we've been supporting the 14,000 restaurants, bars, breweries, wineries, gyms, and fitness centers through the Circuit Breaker Business Recovery Grant, because when we had to go to a circuit breaker, we wanted to make sure that we were supporting the businesses that were hit hardest by that. So it's important to be nimble, and I think the government has shown that, responding quickly. Some of these programs were rolled out incredibly quickly for government, and it's very important to be able to recognize that a lot of these programs normally take months or years to come out, and some of these came out in record time. So it's very, very important to keep nimble, and I think the government has done that throughout the pandemic. And that's why it's very important to continue to look at how things are progressing over the pandemic and into this reopening period. So it's really different, very, very, very important. And I mean, an example of how quickly the programs come together, the Circuit Breaker Business Relief Program was developed in less than a week. So, that's pretty amazing for government, because, it's very difficult to roll out programs. And many may know, we just added $75 million to the Circuit Breaker Relief Program and expanded its eligibility to recognize hospitality, fitness, and accommodation sectors. And we'll continue to help those as quickly as we can when they need it, supporting businesses in a very challenging time. I mentioned the Major Attractions Program that was launched last month. This program, it's a $50 million program, a one-time grant to major tourist attractions and tour bus companies. And we're doing this to help these organizations to weather the impacts of COVID-19 now, so that when they can draw the visitors back when it's safe to travel again. And those applications are open. And of course, any companies that are eligible, I encourage you to please apply. Next slide. Since taking office in 2017, reconciliation has been a key issue for our government. Every ministerial mandate letter clearly states a commitment to truth and reconciliation and the principles of UNDRIP in every ministry across government. And we believe that this is very important. We had started that work in earnest in the last term. And now as we progress forward, we really feel how important that is to continue that very important work. And so the budget, this budget includes stable funding to engage Indigenous people on land and resource activities, legislation, policy. And we're also funding the creation of particular childcare spaces for Indigenous families, skills training initiatives to lead to long-term employment for unemployed and underemployed Indigenous people. And, just as a point generally, because we have seen this, and I know it's not, specifically around Indigenous people, but certainly has been profoundly happening to Indigenous people, is that racism has been on the rise. We saw a rise of anti-Asian racism, for example, but there's this systemic racism that needs to be stamped out in this province. And part of that, of course, is an important part of reconciliation. And so that's why there was a report called In Plain Sight, and that had a number of recommendations. And so it's really important that we move forward with recommendations that help cultural safety and humility training, for example, in the health and mental health services. And we know that obviously the road to reconciliation and addressing racism is not something that's going to happen quickly. And we recognize that this is going to be a journey together. And we're committed to continue to work with First Nations and Indigenous people to create a stronger and inclusive British Columbia for everyone. Thank you. Next slide. I think in terms of climate change, British Columbians have embraced the need for adapting to climate change and to fighting climate change. And so the Clean BC plan is the most ambitious plan in North America in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, dealing with the GHG emissions. And, it's very important that one of the things we want to look at, if we're going to spend the money to recover in British Columbia, let's recover better. Let's figure out ways that we can invest in greener and more sustainable programs, so that post-COVID, that we actually build a cleaner and more sustainable future for the province. And that's why including $506 million in new investments to reduce emissions and create new opportunities and promote affordability is so important, and in commitment to the Clean BC. And in fact, the budget has investments of nearly $2.2 billion over the next 5 years for Clean BC. I think it's over to you for a slide, Lisa. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I muted myself so I didn't rustle papers in your ear there. By keeping people healthy and investing in communities, we can move towards a strong economic recovery that does include everyone. And so our budget 2021 includes record levels of capital investment. As I said earlier, $26.4 billion in funding over 3 years. This is an outstanding number for infrastructure investment. So this is a $3.5 billion increase when you compare it to budget 2020. These investments are going to support a strong, sustainable economy with the investments, like I said, in roads, transit, schools, housing, hospitals. We have investments in hospitals in Cowichan, Surrey, Stewart Lake, Dawson Creek. We have the big replacement of St. Paul's Hospital. We're investing in the future of BC through the INBC Investment Fund, which is a fund that will invest $500 million in high growth potential businesses in BC. And we're going to leverage investments from the public and private sector to help businesses grow. So the fund will be instrumental in helping keep our promise of scaling up companies. And it'll help support startups and anchoring talent here in BC. We want to keep jobs and investments here in BC. Next slide. So our government does recognize how quickly Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows is growing. We are building on the work that we've done over the last 3.5 years, and we'll continue to invest in Ridge Meadows to ensure that it has the infrastructure it needs to match this growth. We're moving forward on major capital investments in healthcare, transit, schools, housing in the coming months. And we know that out of the pandemic, we're going to welcome further investments into our community. Since our last budget presentation, there have been several investments made in our community. And here's just on the slide, a couple in the last 3 months, I believe. So there's a new 66 affordable rental home development of $23 million. There's 225 new childcare spaces coming to Ridge Meadows. We have a joint federal provincial investment in the West Coast Express and refurbishing that. There's $345,000 in Indigenous-led watershed restoration on the Upper Pitt watershed. We have design and planning on the widening of Highway 7 between 266 and 287th Streets in Maple Ridge.
Hey, that's mine.
Oh, sorry, I'll stop talking there. And we have over $200,000 in funding for community-based organizations in the areas of conservation, public safety, emergency preparedness, food security, and women fleeing violence. Next slide. Nope, I didn't get it. There we go. We know that all of us together have been through a great deal. And I know that every single one of us can point to a moment in the last year when our world was turned upside down, or the world of your business was turned upside down. COVID-19 has been challenging, and it has changed British Columbia in ways we could have never imagined. But British Columbians are resilient, and Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows is resilient, and we look out for each other. We have over the past 15 months. And a recovery isn't going to happen overnight, but by focusing on the things that matter most to people, by keeping all of us safe, by ensuring we're investing in the services you count on, and ensuring we are doing everything we can to have a strong economic recovery, we're going to continue to be here for British Columbians. We're looking forward to this budget 2021 and what it means for us in the future, because we know how much a strong economic recovery will make a difference to you and your businesses. So with that, Bob and I will say thank you, and we'll turn it over to you, Flory. It has been wonderful to share the budget presentation with you.
Thank you very much, Lisa and Bob. I appreciate that. And I think there were some points in there that are questions that will be coming up. One thing I did want to address is, I know Bob had mentioned the circuit breaker. Are there still funds available for that, or has the application process closed? Because I believe it was supposed to be June 4th.
That's a good question. There was an increased amount of funding put into that program and
Right.
Changes to eligibility. So I've been advised to encourage people to continue to apply, and
Okay.
so I would definitely look at that and maybe look at the criteria as well. But there's so much demand on that particular program that I would definitely get on that quickly.
Yeah, because when I go into, I don't know if, maybe I'll look to see if there's an update on it, because when you go into the actual, I think it was the news release. So yeah, I'll take a look into that just to
Yeah.
make sure, because we're still showing it as being June 4th.
Thanks for it.
Yes. So as Bob said, there was an increased investment in it. So I believe
Yeah.
there are still funds available. But the best thing to do for any of these type of questions, obviously, Flora, you've been an amazing resource, and we continually pass out the information we have to you. So reach out to the chamber, but you can always contact our offices, either Bob or myself, and we have amazing teams. If we happen to be here in Victoria, for example, who can help you answer those questions. They have all the information about all the programs there in front of them. So always reach out to us if you have a question.
But you are right. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at it right now, that it does say, closed. So why don't we circle back on that? Because my understanding was there was more money put into that program. So
Yeah. And just to be clear too, the circuit breaker was in response to the faux orders. So it was specific to tourism and hospitality.
yeah,
Right.
it was basically focused on those companies and businesses that were affected specifically by the circuit breaker, particularly restaurants and gyms and whatnot.
Right, fitness, that's right. When it comes to the tourism side of it, I know that people questioned bus companies being part of that. They were just, I don't know if that was from feedback, but it is something that came up a lot in what I saw with when the tourism, resources came out, that bus companies were part of that. So was that based on feedback that was heard, or?
Yeah, there seemed to be a gap that tour bus companies, agencies that operated those type of transportation tourism based seemed to be falling through the cracks, and so they were very specifically included in the program.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. We do have a question. Just bear with me. Across Canada, the pandemic has talked about the she session and how women have had to step back from the workforce. Could you share how Budget 2021 will help women return to their careers?
It's such a good question. So there's a number of investments. First off being childcare. The single most important investment we can make in our budgets to ensure that we're leveling the playing field for women to return to work. There's families all across the province who need it, but significantly this investment. There's investments in small and medium businesses. So we know a number of women are entrepreneurs, but small and medium business owners. So making sure that we're investing in their companies and allowing them to continue operate. The small and medium business grant is up to $40,000, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong. And that's a one-time grant. It's not a loan for the business. So if you or your company want to reach out to us and find out more about that application, we're happy to do that. Education. Large investments in skills training and education programs so that we're training up the next generation of workers, particularly when we're focused on skills training for women and Indigenous peoples across our province who are underrepresented in this type of work. Huge investments in, as Bob mentioned, in the tourism, bar, restaurant industries. These are industries that have been predominantly held by female workers who, need this. These businesses need the support to keep their doors open and keep employing. In addition to that, healthcare workers, particularly in long-term care, predominantly as well, women working in these positions. And so by continuing to invest in areas and support areas that women are working on, continuing to support their businesses and continuing to support the childcare and investments in their education. And so doing everything we can to ensure that we have an equitable recovery for all here in British Columbia.
Yeah, and just to add a brief thing, you know, a lot of women also, well, a lot of people are working at minimum wage, but there's a disproportionate number of women who are working at minimum wage, and that of course was increased, and also the server wage was increased, which is very important.
Eliminated, yeah.
So it basically, the idea is that, look, you know, people, it's hard enough to make a living, you know, so even at minimum wage, it's difficult to make a living, but yeah, so limiting that was very important, I think, for women as well.
That's actually a really good point, Bob, because when we formed office in 2017, we had the lowest minimum wage of all the provinces. And we laid out a plan to get to over $15 an hour minimum wage, which happened last week. We're now at $15.20. So we have gone from being the lowest minimum wage to now the highest minimum wage province in our 4 years. So that definitely is helping to support our workers.
Yeah, and then just, you know, on that too, you know, it wasn't done overnight. It was a balanced approach, because we recognize that businesses need to be able to adapt as well. So, you know, it was this, you know, a slow increase over 4 years, but now we're there, and hopefully businesses have been able to adapt given the period of time too as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And with the minimum wage increase, like you said, that was part of the plan. Is that on time with what the plan was? Having it come out now? It was.
Yeah. When we announced the plan in a few years ago, there were set target dates, and this is all on track. So it was always scheduled to be 15/20 last week, and we achieved that milestone, which is great. And we will continue to work and consult with businesses and workers to make sure that we can continue to ensure we have a competitive environment here in BC.
Okay. Another question that's come in. I'm just reading directly from my screen here. So are there processes currently in place, or have there been talks of measuring and accounting the results of the new programs launched specific to COVID? Second part is, I have seen a lot of positive results and feel that some of these programs should continue beyond COVID recovery, but without stats and accounting, it will be seen only as anecdotal.
That's a very good question. So yeah, each ministry will of course be reviewing the programs that have been launched out of their ministry, and those are conversations we have as part of the budget process every year. Bob might want to talk about he had a large hand in the budget process this year, but each ministry does annually assess what the success of their programs. And so, yes, of course, there will be review done.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I'm sure all of the programs provincially and federally will be examined and gone over very carefully, because, you know, obviously knowing how impactful they are is very important. And I've been very lucky to be appointed to Treasury board. And I can say, witnessing the processes that go to building a budget and the amount of scrutiny is unbelievable. It's so, there's so much scrutiny that goes into every penny that's spent. It's good. I'm glad that that's the process. It obviously makes it slower to get things done, and I know some ministers would like the process to be faster, but that's a very good process to go through, because it does promote and ensure that there is accountability, not just for these programs, but for other programs as well. Because for a program to be renewed, or a program to move forward, it has to show that it was successful. So, and speaking to that, and I can speak, I'm the Parliamentary Secretary for Arts and Film, so I've been working in this space. And in fact, I was working with Minister Beare before I was a Parliamentary Secretary on the arts and culture file early on in the pandemic. We were working together on that. And I can definitely I just finished 70 hours of consultations with the community, with stakeholders. And, you know, everybody who received money says, look, if you hadn't have given money through BCR's council or through the wage subsidy federally or all these programs, we wouldn't have been able to keep the lights on, and we wouldn't have survived. So I appreciate that is anecdotal, but I can say that the enormous amount of feedback that we've been getting is that these programs are actually keeping lights on, keeping businesses going. And we're doing our very best to fill gaps, because, you know, you hear about the gaps. And so that's certainly what we look at all the time. And I know that Minister, you know, Ravi Kahlon is looking at all the time, is those gaps. So excellent question. And I do appreciate it.
Great, thank you both. I wanted to address, I know we've talked about infrastructure and affordable housing and what's being put into that. How do you think that would help us with the, I guess, bedroom community, as they call it? So we have the people leaving work. Where can we get that people are staying in our communities, working and living here and not leaving the community? Where do you think the budget can address that? And also for the staffing side of it too, because there are people that, you know, businesses that find staffing has been a bit difficult.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, I was just going to say that there's definitely a recognition, basically right from the Pitt River Bridge right out to Mission, and I also represent Mission as well and beyond, right into the valley. Obviously, you know, infrastructure is so critical, because we're still exploding with population. You drive down any street, 240th or anywhere, there's townhouses and houses, and they're just going up like crazy. And so people are moving out from the Lower Mainland still because it's relatively affordable. And so you're right. How do we have the infrastructure to support that? Well, that's schools. So there's been a significant investment in schools, seismic upgrades, and building new schools. You know, we have Sescanella, for example, in Albion. We've got another piece of land that's been bought for another elementary school in anticipation for more growth. And Lisa mentioned the forward laning of Highway 7. And I jumped in only because I'm very proud of that, because it's final forward laning, but it's so important in terms of infrastructure, because in order to move people around, we have to have safe highways. And that bit is one of the most dangerous bits of highway we have. So when we were able to announce that moving forward, I was just ecstatic, because that was being asked for. So obviously highways are important. The work on Highway 1 is going to impact us as well. So Highway 7 and Highway 1 is important for our infrastructure. And school, hospital infrastructure. We've got a urgent and primary care center. Anyway, but all of these things are so important for us to be able to sustain the growth that's happening in this area.
And on the housing piece of the question, particularly the announcement that was just made of the property off St. Anne is geared at affordable housing for working families. It's geared for rentals between an income between 30,000 and 60,000. So, you know, it's the whole continuum of housing that is needed. And while we continue to invest in, you know, housing for seniors, for women, you know, we have in our community, we have invested in seniors, in women fleeing violence, in affordable rental housing for working families, in supportive housing. You know, it's about ensuring you have that entire continuum as well. And so those are the investments we continue to make. The Housing Hub, that massive $2 billion additional investment into the Housing Hub will help bring more additional rental units like the ones we just mentioned, you know, for working families, $30,000 to $60,000 a year income. You know, that's what's needed to help support families that were referenced in the question. So thank you.
Thank you. And what do you, either of you, have to say on bringing in staff or finding staff for the businesses that are here?
Do you mean just the sort of the gap that of skilled labor, or just?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's a challenge that's facing the entire province. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but I think it's 80,000 over the next few years that we're need. So it's significant. And the other thing too, during COVID, we've seen sort of migration of people to different jobs and whether or not they're going to come back. For example, just as an example, in the music industry, because the music industry is being closed, so many of the crews have moved to the film industry, and they're maybe not going to come back. And that's just like one example of things, but there's many things that like that have to be addressed. And so I know that the Minister of Jobs is looking carefully at that very issue, because it is a challenge. It's going to be a challenge moving forward. And that's why investing in, for example, more seats in skills training is so critical moving forward.
Yeah, and we just had, this was a passion area of the Premier, and work from Minister King in Advanced Education and Parliamentary Secretary Andrew Mercier, who's just over the bridge in Langley, about putting out a skills training program, a comprehensive program that's not only in, you know, investing in the seats and making sure that we are expanding those education possibilities and getting more skilled workers, but it's also about the certification of them as well, because we were the only province that was not certifying skilled workers, and that needed to change. And so we are, you know, looking at doing those improvements here in BC and making sure that we're certifying our workers so they can, you know, we can attract more talent here as well.
Great, thank you. Let's see, anyone else have questions that they wanted to submit in? Or if you want to be on video or talk, we have a few minutes left.
And as we've said too, as people are thinking about that, you know, please reach out to Bob and Mai's office. We would love to hear from you in person. Always happy to take a meeting, have a chat, or if it's simply questions about any of the programs we've talked about today or any of the opportunities that are available in the budget, please reach out. We'd love to help provide that support.
Yeah, and just in terms of any programs, please reach out to the office. Like I said, a clarification on the circuit breaker, for example, we'll follow up on that and certainly tell Flory about that so that the chamber members will be aware. But the small business recovery grant is still ongoing, and there's other programs that are available. So please, if you haven't applied, do. And for these programs, they're very important. And just in terms of our offices, obviously during COVID, they've been virtual to some extent, and some extent by invitation, and some have been open depending on the jurisdiction. But we'll keep you posted as far as the MLA offices and in-person meetings over the coming weeks, so that we can, you know, I'm getting sick of these Zoom meetings. I'm sure all of you are. We really want to crave that personal connection, and I certainly am. The walls of my Zoom box have been closing in over the last few months, so I'm looking very much forward to seeing everyone in person and being able to have those face-to-face discussions that we need. So thank you.
Yes, I think that's a very worldwide sentiment right now. I'm kind of jumping back to the tourism. You had mentioned the 100 million that's going to be going into that for funding and recovery. And is that going to, because I know we have the circuit breaker that's directly applied to that, is there going to be new resources available coming up for that amount, that tourism industry?
Okay, so there's been a number of investments on the tourism file. There's been all the development opportunities, you know, for communities, for businesses, to improve infrastructure, build trails, all of that. You know, while a theater's dark, for example, using the opportunity to do renovations. We've had the business grants, the small and medium business grants that apply, which is $40,000. And then if you're a tourism operator, there's a $10,000 additional amount you can receive, because we know that tourism was hit particularly hard. There was the 100 million that was recommended by the Tourism Task Force Sorry, that's the bells in the legislature calling us back. The Tourism Task Force recommended, and then we had the $50 million in anchor attraction. So there's been a number of investments, and we will continue to take a look at the sectors that need it. That's why we have such a large contingency dedicated towards COVID. We need to be nimble. We need to be able to address what people and businesses need in the province. And so we'll continue to consult heavily with the sector, which, I mean, Bob just did 70 hours with just the arts sector alone. We'll continue to work with the sector to ensure that we're getting the supports to those who need it.
Great, thank you. And I guess we've got about 5 minutes left. So one last thing is, what would you say to our small, medium business owners that are still struggling, still needing to access resources? So if you want to tie that last question into your closing remarks, and we'll close off once you're done. Thank you.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say to all the businesses in Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows is you've done an amazing job over the last 16 months, just seeing the pivots that so many of you have made, getting your stores ready with with the plexiglass and all of the public health measures that have had to be taken, and then shutting down and then having to reopen. And we appreciate how tough it's been for everyone. And all I can say is the resilience is amazing. It's just seeing that, and also seeing some businesses have actually been able to pivot to digital and actually seen new opportunities for sales, and that's been pretty exciting as well. So it's a very tough time, but there have been a few silver linings with COVID, and one of those is that I would also say, please look at the programs that are available provincially and federally. If you haven't, continue to apply, continue to contact us if you're having issues, and we'll do our very best to help you navigate those programs. So thanks for all of your efforts. You kept all the stores, keeping people fed, keeping people clothed, keeping people with the resources that we needed to get through this. So all I can say is thank you so much.
Great. And I'll just echo Bob. He said it all very well. It's all of your hard work and sacrifice that have gotten us here with that light at the end of the tunnel. And so I want to thank all the businesses for everything they did to keep us safe. It was all of you who got us here today. So thank you so much, everyone. And please reach out. We will happily walk you through all the programs that are available, and we'd be more than happy to have that chat. Have a good day, everyone.
Well,
thank you for joining. Thank you for the invite, Flory.
Of course, I appreciate that, and I thank you both. I just wanted to touch on something that Bob had said with the pivot to people going digital. That's another reminder of another program, the Launch Online grant program. So that's still available. I believe it's been extended and had additional funds put into it as well. So yeah. Another resource to look into, and we do have our resource page. There's a lot of information there, but we are here. You can look at the information if you have questions on how to navigate it, on what it is. You can call, like Lisa and Bob said, you can reach out to them. You can reach out to our office. We're here to help support our members, businesses, and our communities. So we're always here as well. So Bob,
Thanks.
You were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say thanks to the Chamber. Lovely to be able to talk to you, and looking forward to seeing you in person.
Great.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.